Hello, Bill.
Who's that?
This is
Who's
Alexis.
that guy?
How are you?
Something's the hair. The hair is a little different. It's not what I'm used to.
Yes. We can all agree Alexis is better looking than me, but you're stuck with me. I'm back. I'm back from. I can't believe. I think this may be the longest we've ever gone without talking in 5 years.
I was having a bit of withdrawal. Now, granted, Alexis Levinson, it was a delight, and she was on the ground, giving me all that ground game color that you were not able to give me. So I had the methadone I needed to get through the tough times.
But I heard there was some uproar last week because we did not tape an episode at all last week. So that you were still busy, and it was winter break for the kids, and that's a lot, really. Yeah.
I don't think schools realize what a horrible thing school vacation weeks are. And there's a bit of a lull between the contests. So I thought we could get by. If there was a week to take off this season, last week was it. All
right. Well, we're back in the saddle again. We are taping this on Tuesday, which is caucus day for Republicans in Nevada, so that just know that going in. We're still.
Everyone assumes Trump's going to win, but it's a very low turnout affair, and Trump has yet to win a caucus.
Right. Listen, I think before we get into this, I think we need to talk about our predictions. Because I've had some very good predictions and a bad prediction, and you've got Jeb Bush to answer for as well. So,
before let's not get into all that yet. But we'll humiliate me over Jeb soon enough. What have you been doing? How has your month been? The book is out. You're on CNN like 20 times a day. Tell us what your life's been like.
It's been great, but also very busy. The book came out January 26th. It's been just a whirlwind. There was a huge blizzard that hit the weekend that the book came out. The weekend before the book came out, I was on Face the Nation that Sunday. There was a huge 2 feet of snow hit D.C. I had to get an SUV to come rescue me, stay 2 nights at a hotel in D.C., to make sure I was able to go on Face the Nation. And then my wife and I took the train to New York, did the rounds up there. And so that was a busy week doing book promotion stuff. And then, of course, a week later, you have Iowa. And it was announced that I'm now a contributor for CNN. And in the last month, I think I've been to New York twice, New Hampshire twice, Iowa once, Palm Beach once, and I'm going to Houston for the debate to do some sort of debate coverage or coverage around the debate. I'm leaving tomorrow.
The debate's Thursday, right?
The debate's Thursday in Houston, and I'll be there doing commentary and whatnot. So a lot of this is really. This is our Super Bowl. I mean, this is like the hot time. If you're interested in covering Republican politics and elections, this is the busy time. And it's interesting that my book, the primaries, the early primaries and the CNN deal all sort of happened at the same time. And it's been crazy. I've had at least 4 different book parties in the DC area alone already. Just speeches, TV hits, and then family time with the kids whenever I can get it.
So there's lots of aspects about this. I mean, not just just for the record, usually you and I have some chit chat before we talk on air. I've had no chit chat with you. I really don't know what you've been doing the past few weeks. So I need to ask you, and I want to ask you in the context of what's going on in the world. So the book came out. It it nails the too dumb to fail dynamic of this season. Trump continues to rise based on the too dumb to fail premise. I see that many people within conservative movement corners and Beltway corners are embracing what you are saying, yet Trump is still winning. So on one hand, it's from my vantage point, like the book's thesis is being widely embraced, yet it's failing to stop the bleeding. So, how do you feel about how the reception has been?
Oh, I think the reception of the book's been great. The thing I was most worried about was that conservatives would not take it as constructive criticism or introspective, and that has not happened. It's been very well received by conservatives. The Weekly Standard wrote a great review. People like Eric Erickson have had very kind things to say about it. I spoke at the Leadership Institute where I used to work, a conservative organization, over 100 people there, and every one of them came up. I was expecting somebody to come up and give me an earful. Every one of them came up and were like, wow, thank you for writing this. Someone needed to say this. So I've been really, really happy. Now, of course, people who are sort of anonymous Twitter trolls who support Donald Trump don't like me and don't like the book. But I thought there might be some pushback from kind of mainstream conservatives and who wouldn't read the book but might just not like the fact that I'm writing it. So far, I think it's been very well received by conservatives, and that's kind of made me happy. I mean, I guess you could argue that it might be better if I had gotten into a big fight with like Laura Ingraham or Ann Coulter, just in terms of controversy. But no, I've been actually the reception's been great.
I mean, there is a increasing awareness. Rush Limbaugh has said this bluntly, and others have too, that Trump is not a conservative,
right?
And that he is proving that there's a swath of Republican voters who don't really care about conservatism. They care about Trump's attitude. They care about banning Muslims from the country. They don't care about the principles of limited government and or social conservatism or all that stuff. So it doesn't matter that Trump has all these heresies. They just care that he sounds tough and wants to keep Muslims out. To what extent has that surprised you, that that's proving to be the case, that it's not just that it's conservatism that is failing here, it's that conservatism is being outright rejected by a chunk of the party?
Yeah, it's certainly a chunk. I mean, it's a sizable chunk. It is important to note that it seems like about a third of the electorate, the Republican primary electorate. I mean, if you could get Trump one-on-one, I think he has a ceiling that's below 50%. We'll see. I'm a little surprised, but I do have to say it sort of makes sense that I think that as I talk about in Too Dumb to Fail, I mean, a lot of what we think is philosophy is really like cultural signaling, and so for example, I think that here we go with my lights again. Never ends. I don't have enough to contend with without these lights going off. Come on. This is what energy-saving solutions get you, by the way. Lights did go off. What was I going to say?
Cultural signaling.
Right. So I think that Trump is what I would probably compare it to is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is that that says that when people they can't get to self-actualization until they've fulfilled their sort of basic needs for food and clothing or whatever. And I think there's some similarities there. I mean, the ideas that I care about deeply, things like the rule of law or whatever, those are somewhat esoteric ideas if you're concerned about survival. And I think right now we're in a very the mood is such that people are afraid, and they're very focused on these lower order needs. They're not to the self-actualization. How can we have a society or a civilization that flourishes? How can we protect our institute. I mean, those things seem esoteric when you're worried about keeping ISIS from beheading you, making sure your kids can go to school. Whether or not these are overreactions doesn't really matter. The public, I think, at least certainly a sizable chunk of the Republican base feels very scared right now, and so that kind of explains why conservative philosophy and like Edmund Burke seems sort of like too philosophical and esoteric compared to Trump saying like, I'm going to build a wall, we're going to waterboard, we're going to bomb the shit out of ISIS or whatever. So that's kind of my thinking right now.
Now, my other question for you is, being inside the CNN studios so much over the past few weeks, what's the feel of the pundit class and the anchor class in there? I mean, are they surprised by Trump? Were they expecting Trump? Is there a general is there any second guessing? Is Trump our fault? Are we abetting him? Are we giving him too much coverage and letting this demagoguery go unchallenged? Is there any kind of self-introspection going on there?
I mean, I haven't picked up anything that I would consider to be unique or new, like in green rooms. But I would say that I think that among all the opinion leaders and columnists that I know, there's a sense of like, this is unbelievable. We're surprised by this. I'll just speak for myself. I do think that Trump is a master at getting all of us to talk about him, to write about him, to show him on TV. And it's really hard not to, though, because like there was a time, I think, when he was on TV more than was warranted. And that was probably like for ratings, and that probably boosted him. But now he is the front runner, and when he like attacks the Pope, that is like a legitimate news story. So it's not the product of just. I mean, how do you not? If you don't cover that, that's a problem. So this is sort of it's Trump's world. We're just living in it at this point. I've been coming up with desperation theories on how to stop Trump. And I don't know if you heard my latest bill. It's to replicate the Whigs' failed 1836 attempt to stop Martin Van Buren. Do you know this? Do you know this story?
I think I saw it on Twitter, but I hadn't read. I don't know the story, and I hadn't read your piece yet. It does seem perhaps it feels a little desperate. If that's where you have to go.
It's utterly desperate. It's a concession that you can't beat Trump. The only way to stop him is to prevent him from getting the 1,237 delegates he would need to clinch the nomination, thus throwing it into a convention fight where presumably he would have a harder time with party insiders. The idea would be to just let Cruz win Texas uncontested, let Rubio win Florida uncontested, let Kasich win Ohio. So instead of trying to get people to drop out of the race, you keep them in. Just let Kasich uncontested have Ohio. The notion would be to just deprive Trump of delegates.
Well, I guess the risk of that is unless I've had some back and forth on Twitter today with other liberals, because I saw the poll that has Trump beating Kasich in Ohio to argue, look, Kasich has to drop. If you want to stop Trump, and I'm on the presumption that the party leadership wants to stop Trump and sees him as an aggressive cancer on the body of the party, you need to consolidate around Rubio. Cruz is not all that more palatable than Trump is, and Kasich doesn't have much juice anywhere, really. So you got to consolidate around Rubio, and Kasich might be thinking, hey, if I can hang around till Ohio's winner take all, 66 delegates, even if I don't get that much else, if it's a broker convention, I can at least be a broker. I got delegates to play with, so why not hang around till then? If you don't have anyone with a head of steam going into March 15th, your theory that everyone wins their home states may not pan out because they're all seen as flagging. Rubio, I would think, needs to have some upward mobility on March 1st so we can win at least Florida on March 15th. At least it's a big risk if he isn't, just assuming he's going to win it on home state grounds alone. So I'm curious, when you talk to people in Washington, I mean, to what extent is there a sense of urgency that the consolidation has to happen immediately so Trump doesn't accumulate an insurmountable delegate lead, and you can at least hold him down, as you were saying, so you could consolidate your forces at a broker convention? Or is there a sense of resignation? Yep, we made this bed. What are you gonna do? 20 is gonna suck. We'll have to just pick up the pieces after it's all done.
I would say more the latter. I'm not seeing the urgency that I think this demands. I don't know if people are in shock, or if they just naively believe that somehow Trump can't win the nomination, or if they're just so beaten down and pathetic that I have not seen. Like, I think people should have been hitting the panic button weeks ago, and I have not seen the urgency. Which, by the way, I love that sports line too. That's just a great sports line metaphor about, I'm not seeing a sense of urgency in the Redskins this year. But in this case, it's not just a cliche. We need to take this seriously.
I mean, I'm seeing senators. I saw John Cornyn just the other day say, let's not fill this Supreme Court seat so it can be a referendum on election day, and we'll raise the stakes for the presidential election. Cornyn's literally using that language while Donald Trump is on the verge of winning the nomination, clearly the weakest possible general election candidate they could have based on the current polling, let alone what the polls might look like, several months from now. That doesn't seem to gel. Why would you be going out of your way to make this presidential election the most consequential presidential election, when the entire Supreme Court balance on the line, and just shrug your shoulders at having a total buffoon be the nominee?
I feel like their impotence is actually an argument for Donald Trump. Like, the fact that they cannot get their shit together to try to stop Trump is indicative of what Trump says about the establishment being, like, impotent and corrupt. It just, it's an argument for Trump. The fact that they can't, that they're just sort of like sleepwalking through his nomination, basically.
How hard is it? I mean, I understand the difficulties up until this point, but look, Christie's out, Jeb is out, Kasich is weak. Lots of party people like Rubio. What is so hard with flooding the circuits and getting on all the TV shows you can, and getting your billionaires to fund their super PACs, and just do an all-out blitz about how awesome Rubio is, and how a Trump nomination means Hillary Clinton controls the Supreme Court? I mean, it's not that complicated. I mean, it takes some organization, and I realize the Republican Party is not at its most crackerjack, but that doesn't strike me as the hardest play to put together.
Yeah, well, I mean, this, and it's something I talk about in Too Dumb to Fail, that there are no adults left, there are no leaders. It goes back to the Wim F. Buckley, sort of policing the right, and how there's nobody there to do it. And, there's a good, Bret Stephens has a piece in the Wall Street Journal today, taking Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh to task for sort of building up Donald Trump early on and allowing him to turn into this monster that they're now, at least Levin is trying to stop. Because he prefers Cruz. So the people who might have had the imprimatur to say something and to sort of put the brakes on Trump early on are sort of complicit in helping him grow and catch fire. So not only are there no adults, but they're sort of complicit in this as well.
I lost my train of thought there. Why don't we just turn to what I know you want to talk about, which is my utter wrongness, my another prediction fail on my part, Jeb Bush not becoming the nominee. Should I speak first, or should you pick me apart first?
I'll go first, Bill. First let me just admit I made a very stupid move by tweeting out that I thought Bernie Sanders was gonna win the Nevada caucus, which is very stupid of me, because I have not followed the Democratic primary very closely. and Nevada caucuses are probably somewhat unpredictable. And I believe I had a source on the ground that was telling me that it looked like Bernie was going to win, a trusted source. And then I saw those exit polls showing Bernie winning the entrance polls. Bernie allegedly winning the Latino vote 53%. So I tweeted that I thought he was going to win. Within an hour, Hillary Clinton had been declared the winner, and I looked like a fool.
Well, it shows how dangerous those exit poll subsamples are. Super dangerous
because the sample size is so small, for one thing.
Exactly. And you can't take that stuff as being on the money.
So I think I think you and I are guilty of the same thing, which is to say, now if you look at the Republican primary, my predictions, I have to say I'm pretty impressed. I called on so a couple months ago, I in the Telegraph, I made predictions, and I predicted Cruz would win Iowa, Trump would win New Hampshire, and Rubio would win South Carolina. But that's a few months ago. But a couple days before each of the election, I've been on each of the primaries. I've been on CNN, and they put me on the spot and asked me to make predictions. And I accurately predicted Cruz would win Iowa. I accurately predicted Trump and then Kasich coming in second in New Hampshire. And I accurately predicted Trump and then Rubio coming in second in South Carolina. So I think it's a pretty good track record. When I'm playing, what's the whole line from The Big Lebowski? You're out of your. What does he say? You're out of your.
I don't remember.
It's not league, but anyway, someone will tell us in the comments. Your Ken. I don't know. I don't know what the word is. Your depth. You're out of your depth, Donnie. I think is the thing, right? Anyway, I was out of the point is I think the mistake I made was being stupid enough to mouth off on Twitter about the Democratic caucus, which I hadn't really followed that closely. And I would venture to say, Bill, that you probably have a better handle on Democrats and the left than you do on the right, which is why I think I was right about Jeb, and I think you were wrong about Jeb.
Well, your mistake, the common mistake of the pundit on the opposite side of the fence is you assume that the craziest element of the opposing side is the entire face of the other side. I think that's the common mistake. So people on the left are always saying, that whatever nuttiness is going on the right, that is what is most important, and whatever nuttiness is happening on the left is what Republicans and conservatives think is most important in the Democratic Party. My mistake this time, I had the temerity to assume the Republicans were going to be sane. So I'm really pissed off that I put some faith in you guys, and you screwed me.
Well, I knew that you were. I knew that Jeb did not match the zeitgeist. The spirit of the times or whatever on the right. That he was out of touch with that. I think I had a better handle because I've spent the last several years writing this book about the right and studying conservatives. I feel like I think it was predictable that Jeb would not catch fire, but then again, this is a guy who, again, admittedly, I totally botched Nevada. So some of this I think is also just luck. I got right. So I got right picking Trump and Rubio in South Carolina, but Rubio won by 1,000 votes. In South Carolina, he beat out Cruz for second place by 1,000 votes. So, some of it's just dumb luck as well. But who knows?
Mm-hmm. Well, just to close off the Jeb point before we shift to the Democrats, my underlying premise always was, and still is, by the way, I'm not resigned to Trump being the nominee. I think the Republicans still have a couple weeks to pull it together. Is that the establishment always wins. Establishment consolidates easier than the right consolidates. And therefore, the person that the party leadership gets behind eventually pulls it out. And my other presumption, so that part can still be true. That part has not been disproven yet. It may be disproven in a couple weeks. And as I wrote in the piece I wrote in November, how Jeb could emulate John Kerry, is that in 2004 you had the murder-suicide between Richard Gephardt and Howard Dean, which Kerry sneaked through in Iowa. In New Hampshire, we had that. Christie took out Rubio in the New Hampshire debate, and while it didn't lead to Jeb, really catapulting, it got him ahead of Rubio. And so for a couple of days, I felt it was all coming together. You had George Bush coming down to South Carolina. You had Trump attacking George Bush, which puts more spotlight on Bush. So I thought there still was that moment that it all could catch. And then Nikki Haley comes in and backs Rubio, and that's all scotch. No, so that's only to speak to my general wrongness. But there are still elements of that were not totally wrong. But the fundamental point that the establishment eventually consolidates and wins the day. There are delicate mathematical issues with that right now. If that consolidation doesn't happen extremely quickly, and just to go back to what we were saying before, it's odd to me that more gears aren't moving in that direction right now.
Yeah, me too. There doesn't. You said it earlier with the sense. There does not seem to be a sense of urgency, and it's like, at what point do people step in and say, okay, it's hit the panic button? Maybe there are no leaders who can do everything, can do anything. That's probably the case. But it's very weird. This is an amazing. I feel like Malcolm Gladwell's argument about tipping points is sort of true. I feel like what happens is, like, the culture changes gradually, but then politics changes somewhat rapidly. So if you can go from a Mitt Romney being your nominee in 2012 to Donald Trump being your nominee 4 years later, that's not a you would think that you would go to, like, Romney to Cruz to Trump, that there might be, like, something in, a middle ground in between, like, slouching toward the White House. But no, it looks like the tipping point just happens, and then all of a sudden you end up with a reality star.
So, do you have any questions for me about the Democrats, or do you just want me to pop off?
Well, I'll just tell you my take, and then I'd love to, if you think I'm right. I felt like Nevada was incredibly important. If Bernie wins Nevada, the revolution sort of continues. He's going to lose South Carolina, but I think the storyline, it becomes a serious race. But now my take, and I'd love to get if you agree, but I think that once he lost Nevada, basically now he becomes a protest candidate. He can accumulate delegates, but I think that now there's no longer a serious threat to Hillary.
Well, I agree with that, although I don't discount the delegate collection operation right now. And I wrote about this in Politico a couple of weeks ago. You have with Bernie, you have this deep generational split that's materialized. And to the extent that I've not been right about the Democrats, that I did not foresee that occurring when I wrote about Hillary and Bernie earlier in the year. I always said Hillary was going to win, and that Bernie wouldn't prove to be much competition. And that still might prove to be generally correct, but the notion that people under 35, particularly, and it seems to be crossing racial boundaries right now. We don't know to what extent it crosses African-American bounds, but we're seeing data to suggest that Latino voters under 35 are also highly for Bernie, which is why he did as well as he did with that group in Nevada, even if it wasn't an outright victory. And so if you are, my age and above, and you were alive and an adult during the Clinton presidency, your attitude about the Clintons are, these people are the winners. These are the people that won when Democrats couldn't win. Mm-hmm. These are the people that showed us how deranged Republicans are, how the Republican Party ceased to be a responsible governing party, became totally obstructious and oppositional, scandal mongers. It taught us how awful the media is, how the media will abet whatever junk Republicans throw at a Democratic president. And sure, they might not be liberal down the line, but they were dealing with all these circumstances that make that kind of idealistic politics practically impossible. So we will cut them some slack when they diverge from orthodoxy. If you're under 35, you weren't alive during that time, or you weren't paying attention because you were too young. If you're in college right now, you were a toddler for Nader 2000, so you weren't scarred by that experience. Your beginning of politics is the market crash of 2008, and you don't even have much of a memory of living under of any Republican president. So one, your sense of what's politically possible is shaped differently. You've been told that what Obama has done is overly constrained because he didn't rally the public the way Bernie is saying is possible. And number two, your Clinton narrative begins with Glass-Steagall repeal, not with 1992. And so everything you learn about the Clintons begins from there. These are the people that deregulated Wall Street. What other horrible things have they done? And so you hear about the crime bill, and you hear about the welfare reform bill, and you hear about NAFTA and stuff like that. And so that's how your worldview gets shaped. So you got these two generational camps that are just not on the same page at all.
Doesn't it seem like, Bill, what you're describing and what we didn't? I feel like right now there are like a lot of changes happening, and maybe it's just the age that I am, but I'm really feeling like I'm having to adapt and reassess a lot of assumptions that I've had about politics, because I think that the rules are changing, and clearly we've talked about that on the right, and now what you're describing, the perception of the Clintons, is another example. I mean, obviously things are always changing, but I feel like maybe it's because we have presidential elections every 4 years, and that creates a moment where we can see how sort of document the change. You know, if you didn't see it, if a child was growing, but you only saw him every 4 years, you'd be like, wow, he's grown so much. But I don't know, it feels to me like we are witnessing on both sides some dramatic changes in terms of perceptions and the sort of the political wisdom or knowledge that we've accumulated that we tend to think of as institutional knowledge can become baggage if we're not careful.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's a question of rules changing. I mean, there is a rule. I mean, not a hard rule, but plenty of politicians, after they've been around for a long time, are saddled by the baggage of their record. I mean, that's not baggage in the scandal sense. Just you're around for a long time. You make a lot of decisions, and decisions eventually piss people off. I mean, that, you know, where I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, you know, our mayors tend to stick around for 12 years. We have 3 mayors in over 12 years, but you see, by the 10th year, people start to get mad at you about stuff. You've done a lot of things, and the batting average matters less. You know, even if you're batting, you know, 750, people are mad about the 25% of the other stuff. You know, Hillary Clinton's been on the stage for 3 decades. There's a lot of stuff. You know, I mean, I just heard about the crime bill for Real Clear Politics. Here's a very complicated bill. It has stuff in it that liberals like. It had the assault weapons ban. It had the Violence Against Women Act. It had drug treatment programs. It had crime prevention. Some innovative crime prevention ideas like midnight basketball leagues that don't cost a lot of money. But what everybody remembers of it now is the 3 strikes provision that kept you in prison for life if you did certain violent crimes. And even that was only for federal crimes. Most mass incarceration issues involve state prisons, not federal prisons. But Clinton is now blamed for popularizing that concept. And even though Bill and Hillary have expressed regret for that, people, you know, again, if you're young, you don't necessarily know about Willie Horton, how that sunk the Democrats in 1988, how crime was more than double the rate as it was today, and Democrats have a reputation of being soft on crime, how the Clintons compromised with the Black Caucus, and many in the Black Caucus supported the bill as it was because they got things in it that they wanted, and no one was assuming that. I mean, Bill tried to narrow the 3 strikes provision so it wouldn't be this big catch-all. Not to say it, I mean, obviously didn't work out in practice, but it wasn't like there was this deliberate belief that was going to cause a mass incarceration epidemic. That wasn't the intent. You can still criticize the record, and Bernie Sanders voted for this too, so we can't use it as a weapon against the Clintons. It's worth going back and looking what worked and what didn't. But because when you're on the stage for a long time, the positive of that bill, Violence Against Women Act, is a huge success. There are elements of the assault weapons ban, particularly there's a ban on high-capacity magazines, that there was evidence that was working to reduce carnage. Those things are not talked about as much as the bad stuff is talked about. I mean, that's a typical dynamic with politicians who have been around for a long time. So I don't see that as an example of rules being broken. It's an example of a rule in effect that makes it hard for a veteran politician to be inspirational.
Right. I think that may be right. I mean, as much as I try to, study history and see examples and learn from it, I mean, I guess in a way we're all the product of our own experience. And it is weird. You get to be, when you're 25, you don't have an experience of seeing people get old, really. If you're 25 and your memory goes back, 15 or 20 years, right? And if your uncle was 30 when you were 5, he's like 45 now or something, right? And so he's not that old. And if someone was 70 when you were 5, and now they're 90 or I don't know whatever, they were old then, they're old now. But if you get to be 40, you have the experience of seeing, like, Bill Clinton. I remember Bill Clinton being the young, charismatic, fat, fun, lovable, bad boy Bill Clinton. And now you see this guy that is not that. And he seems to have lost his... It's like when Fonzie lost his cool in that episode of Happy Days. And it's weird. And I think that that some of what we're seeing... I mean, I just thought that the Clintons sort of had earned, fair or not, but that they had they sort of had the Democratic Party and the liberal base kind of locked up. And I got what happened with Obama because he just seemed like this very exceptional, rare, special young candidate. But it is a little surprising to me to see how she's still kind of struggling with the liberal base, the progressive base, even against Bernie.
But it's not just. I mean, obviously there's an element of that, but Hillary in Nevada pretty much split the liberal vote with Bernie. She even split. And you look at the exit polls; they break it into very liberal and somewhat liberal. She basically split with the very liberal in Nevada. It was a little less so in Iowa and New Hampshire. I think we can discount more as being geographically anomalous. There's obviously ideological difference between her and Bernie, but it's not a left-right break. It's a degrees of left break. And I think the generational aspect strikes me as far more dominant than just straight up, because there are people who are older who would be consider themselves very liberal and probably consider themselves to be more in agreement with Bernie on stuff. I know people like this. I agree with Bernie on nearly everything, but I'm going to vote for Hillary because I think this is she's close enough and she can win. That calculus is more likely with an older, very liberal person than a younger, very liberal person right now. So as far as how much does this matter going forward? If Hillary's got the fast track the nomination, she'll win South Carolina. She'll probably win the lion's share of Super Tuesday, where Bernie really can't catch up in the numbers from there. If he is maintaining that youth support and that hard left support, they keep showing up for him even though they know he's losing, because they know the more delegates that he gets, the more of a player he is at the convention. You can make VP demands. Mm-hmm. You can have platform floor fights over his issues and try to show to the world that. So as I was saying, if Bernie has 40% of the delegates, the way the Democratic rules are, you need 25% of the delegates to force a minority report out of the platform committee, and then you can have the floor of the convention debate the different reports. So we're used to scripted conventions that are just 3-day advertisements for the nominee. If you're soaking up time debating breaking up the banks or not, or single payer, or money in politics or what have you. Maybe they're going to bring up Social Security, try to tie Hillary's hands on Social Security reform. That's not where Hillary wants to be. She doesn't want to be exposing rifts in the party at convention time. And again, the younger voters today who have no memories of Nader 2000 may not be worried about how much leakage you might get after the convention, how many people might break off and go green or go somewhere else. And if it's a close race, that could be a problem. Now, if it's Clinton Trump, maybe it's not going to be a close race, and who cares? But it's that kind of thing that I think Bernie remains relevant, even though I think his path is basically non-existent at this point.
Well, let me just say, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Trump would lose to Hillary, even though I think Trump would be very bad long-term for the Republican Party. I think he might surprise people and do better than we think against Hillary. I'm just saying.
Obviously, Trump has defied pundit predictions to a great deal to this point, but we have never elected someone as buffoonish as Donald Trump ever. And even if people might, liberals might point at George W. Bush, but George W. Bush didn't actually win in 2000. Trump, it would be beyond the pale insane. He's winning a third of the Republican electorate in small turnout contests. He needs 60 million plus votes in a general election. I have a real hard time seeing how that occurs.
All right, well, let's throw this out to the commenters. Is Bill right, or am I right? I argue that Trump is incredibly talented at manipulating the media, that Hillary's a vulnerable candidate, that Trump's the first guy. We saw what he did by driving, sort of putting her on defense over Bill Clinton's past indiscretions. I think Trump is a political chameleon who can tack to the center and change his views overnight without paying any price for hypocrisy. I think he can drive media narratives, dominate news cycles, and I think he might be able to pull out working-class whites in places like Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania. So, again, I know there's a conventional wisdom that he can't beat Hillary. I'm concerned about him for many reasons, but that's actually not the top reason that I have. My concern would be if he wins, we still don't know what he's like. Even if he wins, he might appoint liberal Supreme Court justices, for example.
Well, I think that Trump has a degree of a degree of cross-party appeal. He'll go after Hillary on trade, for example. He'll probably sound less hawkish than Hillary on sort of military matters. He has more of an isolationist streak, and that will appeal to some on the left. But he's going to lose a lot on the right. The national security wing of the party is going to go with Hillary over Trump. I bet you'll see outright Republican endorsements for Hillary over Trump on that ground. You're going to have lots of social conservatives that stay home or vote third party in that circumstance. There was a general election poll that just came out yesterday that Hillary beating Trump in North Carolina. So even if Trump can pull off a couple of those Rust Belt states, how many red states is he going to lose? I cannot see that coalition holding for someone who was a literal joke.
Again, I think that you may think more highly of the public than I do, Bill, and therefore I believe that I have a better read on them. But that's just me.
Anything else you want to talk about as far as the Democrats are concerned?
No, I think I'm biased, of course. I just feel like the Republican Party's primary is probably more interesting and more up in the air at this point, certainly. I think Hillary probably, is fine unless she's indicted. And I think that, can we stop Donald Trump is an interesting question. And this strategy for how to potentially do it. I do think there's a chance that there's a contested convention, which, if that happens, would just be amazing to cover, and you can just imagine how the political media world will descend on Cleveland to cover that, and And if there's a perception that party elites are stealing the election from Trump, how that will go over. So, you have to hope for that. If you're, if you put aside like caring about America, caring about the party or whatever, caring about the movement, all those things. This could be incredibly entertaining to see how it unfolds.
Well, before we get to the broker convention, we had that debate this week, Tuesday in Houston, and Rubio did not fare well in the last one.
No, he did. He did in the last one. It was 2 debates ago.
Oh, so 2 debates ago.
The New Hampshire debate, he did horrible.
But his avoidance of direct confrontation with Trump will be sorely tested this week. So I am curious to see how he handles a one-on-one confrontation with Trump, because that's the ball game. Can he actually face that guy down?
I don't know. I don't know if that's the ball game or if that's what Rubio should even do. But I do think he has to have a good
Trump's
debate.
going after him, right? Trump's going to throw a punch at him.
Yeah. Now, what Trump is now, after having said that Rubio was a citizen because he was born on the land, or what, that he was a natural born citizen. Now Trump is now that Rubio is posing a threat, Trump is reassessing that and insinuating that Rubio, in fact, may not be eligible to be president either. So Rubio will have to deal with that. But
so does he punch back, or does he try to just pivot away and speak to broader American themes again? That didn't work with Christie. So he's got to worry about being able to actually retort in a way that, Trump's whole deal is, strong and wrong beats weak and right. He sounds strong. He sounds like he's the big dog, and it doesn't matter what actually comes out of his mouth. Rubio has to be able to match that in some way, or get Christie all over again.
I think Rubio has a way of sort of, with a wink and a nod, dismissing Trump as crazy without engaging him. And I think he's sort of gotten away. It's very subtle. I feel like he's gotten away with it so far. Now, he may not be able to, if Trump continues to go after him relentlessly, then Rubio will be drawn in. He'll have to fight back. Otherwise, he'll look weak. But I think Rubio's inclination is to not engage too much with Trump, to sort of implicitly dismiss it as like, this guy over here, we all know what we think about him, but let me talk about the real issues about stopping Hillary Clinton, that sort of thing. I think that's going to be Rubio's inclination. I could be wrong, but it seems to me that's what Rubio is more comfortable doing, not directly fighting with Trump.
I think it will be an extraordinarily high-stakes affair on Thursday. I'm excited to hear your take on it. Probably should end things on this note. Thanks to Alexis Levinson, who's still doing fantastic work on the campaign trail. Check her out at the National Review.
Alexis is great, my former colleague here at the Daily Caller, and doing great reporting. And as we write this, she's on the ground in Nevada. So everybody should follow her on Twitter and read her stuff.
And where can we find more of your fine work?
All over the place, but the Daily Caller, and Get Too Dumb to Fail, and watch me on CNN.
Check out the recent piece I had in Politico. Actually, I had the Real Clear Politics piece on the crime bill this week, and in Politico, how Ta-Nehisi Coates gave Hillary the ammunition she needed to dispatch Bernie on race in Nevada. So that's over at Politico right now. Till next week, this is the DMZ show. Thanks for coming back, Matt.
Thank you, Bill, and good to be back, and we'll see y'all right here next week.